Welcome to the McAfee Center Stage webinar series. My name is Austin and I'll be your facilitator. This webinar is a brief overview covering the common use cases and scenarios regarding this topic. It is not intended to be an all-encompassing, as it is not possible to cover all detailed scenarios in an hour. If assistance is needed, please contact McAfee Technical Support. Our presenter today is Mitchell Buehler. Mitchell is a technical support engineer for the Dynamic Endpoint Group and has been with McAfee since 2018. Mitchell provides support for all products in the Endpoint AV segment, including Move, ENS, and VSE across all platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Mitchell.
Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to be covering primarily the upgrade from Move 4.6 to Move 4.8, and then after covering that, we'll be doing some performance tuning overviews, covering the queries, diagnostic client tasks, and building a policy based on that, and then covering a short demonstration. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do before you get started in your upgrade procedure is to verify your environment is up to snuff and ready to go. So you're going to want to first make sure that you're on a compatible EPO version for 4.8, and for that you need to make sure you're at least in between 5.3.3 and 5.9.1. You won't be able to upgrade straight to EPO 5.10 before upgrading to Move 4.8 due to incompatibilities with the extensions for Move 4.6. For your clients and SVMs, you'll want to make sure that you're in between agent versions 5.0.5 and 5.6.0. And you'll want to make sure that you have endpoint security, platform and threat prevention, the product packages, as well as the extensions at least version 10.6. And then once you've got those requirements in place, just do a basic health check of your environment, verifying communication for all your clients and SVMs, and just do a basic assessment to make sure that you have an adequate number of SVMs in your environment for your clients. One of the best times to add additional SVMs is during an upgrade procedure. So if you need to add some SVMs, provision those resources before you do the upgrade process. So the first of two procedures that we're going to cover here is going to be the seamless upgrade procedure. If you're wanting to ensure that you have a complete coverage of protection throughout the entire upgrade process, with the exception of when the client is installing on the end user machines, the seamless method is the way to go. Essentially, what you're going to be doing is creating a duplicate pool of SVMs on 4.8 while your 4.6 SVMs are still in place in order to provide a seamless transition of your clients from 4.6 to 4.8. And the procedure there is fairly straightforward. You first check in the 4.8 meta package in EPO. You can either download this from the software manager or the product download site. Either way is fine. And then the first actual step in upgrading things is going to be your SVM manager. There's a couple different ways to do that. You can either do that just from a product deployment task in EPO, or you can go through the Move antivirus deployment page and click the upgrade button there. And once you've got that taken care of, you're going to want to provision your resources and deploy your 4.8 SVMs. And on these SVMs, you'll deploy the McAfee agent and endpoint security threat prevention. You'll also want to do an update after that to ensure that the AM core content version on those SVMs is good and can actually initialize the engine for the SVM. Once those deployments are taken care of, you want to go ahead and tag those new SVMs in the same manner as your 4.6 SVMs. That way they register with the SVM manager, and any clients that move over have a valid assignment. And once you've got ENS deployed and the AM core content upgraded on your SVMs, you'll want to deploy the Move 4.8 SVM package. Once that's good, you see those SVMs registered with the SVM manager, you'll deploy the Move 4.8 client package to all your clients. This can be done in stages just to minimize network traffic, but it does need to be done all at once. You don't want to split up your Move upgrade over multiple days. And once this has been taken care of, you can go ahead and decommission your 4.6 SVMs and free those resources for the rest of your virtual environment. So the second upgrade procedure is a basic in-place upgrade. So this is more so if you're wanting to save on resources and not have to deploy an additional pool of SVMs. It's fairly similar to the same procedure as the seamless upgrade. You start with checking in the 4.8 meta package as well, and then upgrading the SVM manager. And then after that, you just need to deploy McAfee endpoint security to those 4.6 SVMs, update the AM core content. And then once that's taken care of, you then deploy the 4.8 SVM package to those SVMs, and then you can deploy the 4.8 client package to your clients.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the demo here. I'm going to do the full demo of the in-place upgrade procedure, but I'll go through the steps that are required for the seamless that are just a little bit different. It's mostly just the SVM upgrade procedure that's different. So go ahead and get started here. The very first step for both procedures is going to be just to check in the move 4.8 meta package. I've already done that just for the sake of time. Just click this guy right here and wait for him to check in. After that, for both procedures, you're going to want to update the SVM manager. You can do this in a couple different ways. If you've deployed through the Move Antivirus deployment page, you can do that from here. You just check in the SVM manager OVF for the 4.8 version, and then do upgrade SVM manager, and that'll take care of that. The product guide has a little bit more information on that if you need it, or the installation guide, I'm sorry. But for the sake of this demo, we're actually just going to do a client task-based upgrade. I've got a task configured here with a tag. Let's just wake that guy up so he gets the task. And if you do want to do the client task-based upgrade, it's fairly straightforward. You just create a product deployment task. Let's see, where did I? Here it is. You'd select the target platform as Linux because the SVM manager is an Ubuntu appliance, and then just select the package from your master repository here. So that guy is going to be going, and let's just go ahead and pause this for a moment while that task runs, and I'll be back with you in just a second. All right, as we can see here, the SVM manager has been upgraded to 4.8, and it still has its SVMs connected, which is good. So the next step after upgrading the SVM manager is going to be to actually get the SVMs themselves upgraded. So the slight difficulty here lies just in that 4.6 uses VSE for the scan engine, whereas 4.8 uses endpoint security. So what we're going to need to do here is first upgrade these SVMs from VSE to ENS. And you can do that just using a regular old deployment task or through any other method that you prefer. So let's wake these guys up. And take a look at where they're at. And we'll just go ahead and pause here until that endpoint security deployment goes through. All right, so that deployment has finished, as we can see here. Before we can actually go ahead and upgrade the SVM software on those machines, we do need to run an update for the endpoint security AM core content. When this starts out, similar to VirusScan Enterprise, it just has a stub dat, which will show as version 0.5 in the ENS console, and this isn't going to be enough to initiate the move engine. So you can update the content in any way that you would normally do. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and run a client task to do it. And if you haven't had endpoint security in your environment before, you'll just want to make sure in your master repository that you either do a pull before doing this just to make sure, or that you configure your pull task to make sure that it does pull that AM core content before doing this, just so it actually does pull an actual AM core content version. And while this is running, let's just go ahead and step over to the seamless upgrade version for just a second, just to kind of clarify the differences here. So pretty much all you need to do is get an identical set of SVMs, or an identical count of SVMs provisioned and deployed in your vSphere or whatever hypervisor you're using for your move environment, and get the McAfee agent and endpoint security deployed to those SVMs. And same with the in-place SVMs, you're going to want to make sure you run a content update as soon as that's deployed. So we'll just do the same thing for these guys. Let's take a look and see if these guys have finished. Okay, so they're still running that content update. Let's give that just another minute or two. All right, they're finishing up here. All right, so as you see here, they've updated to the latest content that I have available in the master repository, so we're good to go ahead and proceed with the SVM upgrade itself. So, same as the other upgrades and deployments that we've done here, you can just do this with a normal client task. I've got this configured with a tag just for simplicity's sake. And now, since you're doing this in a staggered manner, most likely if you have a larger environment, when you upgrade your SVM manager to version 4.8, it'll still retain those SVMs that are still on 4.6, and it won't cause any impact to your clients that are still running 4.6 during the upgrade if you're doing the seamless upgrade. In the seamless procedure, you stand up identical 4.8 SVMs so that as soon as your clients are actually migrated to 4.8, they immediately switch over to a 4.8 SVM from the manager, and that you only have a very, very brief period of not being protected just during the actual move client update itself. With the in-place, you do have a bit of a period of not being protected while you get your SVMs upgraded and then your clients upgraded after the fact. So if you're doing the in-place method, you might want to consider just doing it in a staggered approach and managing tags that way, so you don't have your entire environment unprotected while you do the upgrade. So let's check here. So they both seem to be installing the 4.8 SVM software now. Shouldn't take too much time. It's a fairly lightweight installer. All right, so we can see here they've already finished that deployment, and if we go check out the server command prompt, you can see that they're connected to the SVM manager. And we're running 4.8. So now, let's just go ahead and do that same thing here. Actually, I don't have that client task configured the same over here, so we'll wait on that. At this point in time, you can go ahead and upgrade your move clients themselves. There are a couple different ways you can do this. If you're using VMware vCenter and you have all of your infrastructure details and everything configured and synced correctly, you can just deploy the client here and use this to upgrade. But in my experience, more people just use the client task approach. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. And same as with the other deployments we've done, I'm just going to use a tag to get this taken care of. All right, let's check on those guys. They're still picking up the tasks, so let's go ahead and pause until this gets taken care of. All right, so the majority of these guys have finished their install. There's the last one. And if we go check the client command prompt, you can see that they've been updated to 4.8. Protection is enabled. They're still connected to the SVM manager, and they've grabbed their SVM assignments like they should. So that's pretty much it for the in-place upgrade. Your existing clients will just pull from the same SVM manager and pool of SVMs as they would have on 4.6. Nothing really changes there. In fact, your policies should stay the same whenever you install the 4.8 meta package, so you don't really have to worry about reconfiguring any of those settings. And for the seamless upgrade, essentially during the SVM upgrade process, as I previously said, you install the agent and endpoint security and then get the 4.8 SVM software on there. And once these guys pick up that software and pick up the policy after the software is installed, they'll reach out to the SVM manager that you've upgraded to 4.8, register with it, and as you start upgrading clients to 4.8, provided you've set up your tagging assignment rules or IP assignment rules for these new SVMs, they'll reach out and grab assignments from the 4.8 SVM pool as soon as those start to register with the SVM manager. So you really don't have very much of a period of being unprotected at all. If you do that, it just obviously requires that you deploy an additional set of virtual machines before all of your clients are migrated and you can decommission the old ones. So that's about it for this deployment demo. We'll pick back up with the performance tuning section of the webinar.
Okay, so in regards to performance tuning and general environmental health checking, we have a pretty substantial number of built-in queries. Some of the more important ones that I've picked out here are the client protection status query, the SVM load query, the client's connected. There's two of them. One of them is from the SVM side, the other's from the client's perspective. The client DAT version, the SVM with higher average scan time query, and then the MP connectivity details and error codes data for machines that are having problems. And then for actual performance tuning queries themselves, these do require you to run the scan diagnostics task to populate the data, but there's the top 10 scanned file extensions, top 10 scanned files, top 10 scanned processes, and top 10 scanned VMs. So for the client tasks themselves, we have the scan diagnostics client task. It's roughly equivalent to running that CLI command on the SVM itself. It monitors scan activity for an SVM during the duration of the task that you configure. It captures the top 10 processes generating the most scan requests, files being scanned, virtual machines generating the most scan requests, and file extensions having the most scan requests. The data from this task populates the top 10 queries that I specified. Client task is the 3 activity and check SVM manager connectivity. You execute these tasks against the client to verify their connection status. It throws an event back up to EPO and populates those reports to get information on the health of those clients. And you can also perform an ICAR test through EPO, which simplifies this a bit. It basically just uses the client task mechanism to pull down an executable that then drops an ICAR on the system, and you'll see the threat event generated from move and sent back up to EPO. But once you've used those performance tuning queries to figure out what's being scanned in your environment, it's important to actually compile this data and make an on-axis scan policy for your environment to reduce the unnecessary scan load. The best way to do this is to run scan diagnostics on your SVMs during peak periods of activity to ensure that you have an accurate picture of the scan activity in your environment during peak periods and not just during off hours or when people aren't doing a whole lot. And you use this data that these scan diagnostics send up to EPO, as well as the knowledge of your environment and what applications you have installed, any in-house things that generate a lot of file IO activity, things like that, and figure out what best could be implemented as exclusions to avoid that unnecessary scan activity and network traffic. And things to consider when you're creating your policy, the file types to scan especially. All files is an option, and for very secure environments, that might very well be something that you want to select, but for a VDI environment where you have a lot of users and a lot of traffic, is that something that you really need to have? That is something that you need to work with your security team to figure out if that's an option you really need, but it is something to consider. And in terms of exclusions themselves, path exclusions versus process exclusions. Process exclusions are always going to be more effective in terms of excluding all of the activity of that process or application, but they do inherently carry a slightly greater security risk over path exclusions, just because you're not explicitly specifying the path. But if you have an application that you know does not perform any malicious activity and it does incur a lot of file IO activity, that's something that you could consider adding as a process exclusion to better exclude that process's activity.
So as discussed in the previous few slides, the built-in queries and the corresponding client tasks for Move introduce a good ability to do some general performance tuning as well as some health checks and just general environmental checks. I want to go ahead and demonstrate a few of those. So let's go ahead and start with the scan diagnostics. So the only option that's configurable in here is just the amount of time for this to run. You have in between 1 and 10 minutes that you can set it to run for. The task that I have is just set for 5 minutes. I've already ran it just for the sake of time here. And that scan diagnostics task essentially populates the corresponding top 10 scan files, scan file extensions, processes, virtual machines queries that are built in. And if we go ahead and run those, we can get an idea of what's being scanned by each SVM. Let's just do scanned processes to start. So in my environment, obviously, I only have 2 SVMs. This is a small demonstration environment. It's not anything close to what somebody would have in production. So it's fine just viewing both of my SVMs at once here. I just did some test activity while those scan diagnostics were running just to at least populate something. And if you want to filter by SVM, just to get some better data, if you run it on multiple SVMs at the same time, you can do that. Whoops. Like so. And obviously this one didn't have anything too interesting, but if we edit this for SVM2, you can see that I was running some VMware stuff. And in your environment, if you have some production applications that utilize a lot of resources in the background and you don't have exclusions configured for them, you might see these here. And process exclusions, as I've stated, are a much more efficient way to exclude applications from scanning than just pure file folder exclusions. So in that situation, I would figure out what applications VMware or what executables VMware are using on the system and implement those into my on-access scan policy. I mean, we can do a similar thing for just scanned files. So my filter in place here. And you can get a pretty good idea of what's being scanned in your environment this way. And something outside of just performance tuning, something pretty useful just for security purposes. If you have a sample that you've submitted and got coverage for, and you know that it's covered in a specific AM core content version, the DAT version query provides you with the DAT version that's reflected on each endpoint corresponding to the SVM that it has assigned. So here I have DAT version or AM core content version 3864 in place on one of my SVMs and 3863 on the other, and you can see that here. So it's useful if you're looking to figure out whether or not your Move environment is covered by, or each of your Move clients are covered by a specific AM core content version. And something else that's useful if you're just looking to figure out, if you're doing a single system troubleshooting scenario, you have one system that you don't know if it's actually working properly, connected to an SVM, connected to the SVM manager. The multi-platform connectivity details query is populated by data from some corresponding client tasks, and in this situation I've created a client task that actually, or a tag that actually runs those client tasks. So I'll assign that now and let that run, and then I'll show you what tasks correspond to that. So those tasks, client task catalog, are going to be the check SVM assignment, check SVM connectivity, and then check SVM manager connectivity. The default tasks that are built in are perfectly fine since there's nothing configurable. But those tasks in combination and the data or the event IDs that they send back essentially correspond to the mvadm status command that exists locally on the clients. And I have already ran these prior to this recording just to actually populate this report. But if we take a look at this, you can see for each of the 4 each of the 4 endpoints. Not sure why this is missing. Okay, I see. For each of the 4 endpoints, we got 3 corresponding event IDs. There'll be one for client connectivity with the SVM assignment to the client, and then the client connectivity with the SVM manager. And if there are any errors here, you'll see the error code listed here. So it's a fairly useful command for just a client task for just a health check. Some other useful ones that I can't really demonstrate here for you just due to the lack of activity in my environment are going to be especially these, the move antivirus SVM with higher average scan time in the last 7 days. If you don't have an adequate number of SVMs in your environment, or if you have some clients that utilize more activity than others and the assignment rules aren't necessarily reflecting that, you'll see the SVMs that are having trouble keeping up with this report. We're probably not going to generate anything, yeah, but that's definitely a useful one in terms of just general environmental health for move. And then obviously you've got your SVM load query. Where is that? Here we go. And this will just show you your list of SVMs and the load per the threshold that you've set. There's a couple other queries that do a very similar thing, but that's generally the most basic one that you can run to do that. So moving away from the queries themselves, actually setting up your on-access scan policy based on what you're getting here. So let's see if we can open this guy in a new tab. So if we run the top 10 scanned, I think it was, files, you can see in SVM2 that we had some VMware related things. If we wanted to go ahead and exclude those VMware directories, we could do that based on this. If you know in your environment that you have some applications per se like Exchange Server or Citrix that you know you need to implement exclusions for, you can do that here as well. Through the process exclusions, you can add a path as well as the executable or just the executable, and that'll exclude all the IO activity per that executable. So if we go back here, run that top 10 scanned processes query. We can just use this guy as an example. And that would exclude any activity by that VMware Python process. You could also just go ahead and exclude all the activity within that program files VMware directory. Like so. You could also do that using the exclude subfolders option, but it's entirely up to you. So once you've made the changes that you'd like to make to your on-access scan policy, just go ahead and hit save. And then you'll want to either perform a wake-up call on your SVMs, or if you created a new policy, change that policy assignment. I don't really have a different policy here, but change that policy assignment on those SVMs, and then perform a wake-up call.
All right, so that's about it for the presentation section of this, and I'll go ahead and pass this off to Austin.
Thank you, Mitchell. We are expanding our customer self-service capabilities, including but not limited to our McAfee Enterprise Support app for Android and iOS, new product support pages, the support community, McAfee Support YouTube channel, social media help needs on Facebook and Twitter. The EPO Support Center extension plugin is available for you to download with your EPO application free of cost. You can learn more about the EPO Support Center on the McAfee Support YouTube channel and on support.mcafee.com. Together is power. This concludes today's webinar.